So hello everyone, I'm Serena. I'm a portfolio GP based in London and I'm co-founder of My Locum Manager, which is a really useful toolkit for, well, pensions, which is the discussion that we're going to do today, as well as invoicing and scheduling for portfolio and locum GPs. And Matt, do you want to hit the presentation? So I'm going to give just maybe another 30 seconds. We've got more and more people signing in. If you go back one, yeah, that's it. So while we're waiting for everyone to log on, it'd be really good to get an idea of who is who's tuned in today. So kind of what level you are. You a GP trainee, or are you locuming, or you're a partner or salaried GP? And also if you can hear okay and see me okay. So you've got a chat box on the top right. So if you just start pinging me to let me know you're here. Can you hear me? Reconnect at the top to see and hear. All good now. No, Asim, it hasn't started yet. We're just chatting, waiting for everyone to log on. Hi, Chiba. Hi, Asim. Catherine, awesome. Yes, Vanna, is it Vanna? You're in the right talk. So just before we kick off, I'll just give you a bit of a background. We are doing an update on the pension changes that have come in since April that are going to be affecting locum, salaried and portfolio GPs, just because there's quite a lot of confusion about what's going on, how it's going to affect us when we're pensioning every month, and what it means for our take-home income. So that's what the talk's about. You'll get a chance to do a live Q&A as well. And you can contribute to the Q&A by posting questions, just like you've been letting me know that you're here. So it'd be good to know how many of you are locuming, how many of you are London-based, or hello, Kathiga, Svetlana, Joanna, Kulminda, hi, Asim, Salam, Harry. Yes, hello, I'm here hosting. Marcel. Hi everyone. Okay, so should we make a start? Great. So I'd like to introduce you to Suzanne. Suzanne, are you there?
Hello, hi.
Hi. So Suzanne, I'm just going to do a bit of housekeeping and then kind of let you or Jenny introduce yourselves. So as I mentioned, I'm Serena and I'm a locum GP, and I'm also co-founder of My Locum Manager. So for those of you that are thinking of starting locum work, you might want to take a look at it because it will help you with a lot of the things we're going to talk about today, pensions and pension forms, as well as managing all the things you need for your tax, keeping track of your sessions, taking pictures of your receipts and putting them on one site, as well as all this stuff, the webinars and the support and things like that we offer. So you can sign up for a trial at mylocummanager.com and give it a go and see how much it can help you. We're also launching quite a few interesting things for primary care in the next few months, so that should help make your locum lives a lot easier. So watch this space. So now I'd like to hand over to Jenny. Are you going to do this bit about introducing yourselves?
Yeah, I will do, Serena. Thank you. Hello, everybody. I'm Jenny Hurst. I'm a healthcare partner at BHP. So I just wanted to take the opportunity to tell you a little bit about BHP for those of you who haven't heard of us before. So we're a top 40 firm, and we have 5 offices in the UK, 31 partners, and over 300 staff. So within BHP, we have a very large healthcare department, which is headed by myself and also by Colin Hoare. So Colin Hoare is also with us this evening.
Good evening.
We're members of AISMA, which is the Association of Specialist Medical Accountants. And at the moment, we act for about 95 GPs and 450 locum GPs. So really, all day, every day, we're working with GPs. We do finance courses for GP registrars for the ST3s in 20 different locations around the UK, and a lot of those are done jointly with My Locum Manager. As far as specialist services go, in addition to the routine accounts and tax work, we also offer specialist services. The ones that are particularly relevant to locum GPs are we're NHS pension experts. So there's two aspects to the pension advice, really. There's the tax calculations and the certificates, and of course the annualisation, which we're talking about tonight, and that's relevant to the three of us in the room tonight. But there's also the pension planning aspect and looking at lifetime allowances and possible tax charges on large pension pots. And we have a team of financial advisors that help us and advise on that aspect. We also deal with a lot of limited companies, so we have quite a few locums who set up their own limited companies. It is important that you take advice from accountants before just going ahead and setting up your own limited company, because they're not always the most tax efficient way to do things. And finally, we also offer advice on employment taxes, and that includes IR35, which is off payroll working, so that's particularly relevant to locums working through limited companies. So that's a little bit about us. I'm now going to hand over to Suzanne Bethel. So Suzanne is a senior manager in our healthcare department and knows quite a lot about superannuation, so she's going to pick that up now.
And just before Suzanne makes the start, I just want to, I don't know if it's got it on the next slide, just to give you a bit of an overview. So the reason why we're doing this webinar is on the 1st of April, there were a number of new changes that were announced to the pension scheme. One was that the employer rate, so the rate that practices pay us, is going up, and it's gone up to 20%. But you'll notice, say on My Locum Manager, when you're invoicing, it's still set at the 14.38%, because at the moment practices are still paying that amount, and the remainder is being made up by the Treasury. And Suzanne may touch on next year. We're still waiting to hear what's going to happen with that. But for this year, you will carry on invoicing your employer rate, your practice rate, at the normal amount. The second big change, which has come into effect 2015 scheme members like me and Matt here and many other GPs, is that annualisation has come in, and that's created a lot of uncertainty and a lot of stress for a lot of us, particularly those that might be doing some salaried work with ad hoc locum or portfolio roles, or locum work, or those of us that have had a maternity break. So Suzanne's going to really try and simplify those changes, share what they mean for us and kind of what they mean for your take-home income and how you're going to calculate it. And hopefully by the end of the webinar, you'll be much clearer on it. And we'll do the Q&A at the end. So without further ado, Suzanne, I'm going to hand over to you.
Hello, good evening, everybody. The focus of tonight's webinar, as Serena said, is on pension annualisation. And we're also going to look at the background to the NHS pension, how it's calculated annualisation, who's affected by it, and touch on the rule changes from 1st of April 2019.
Grab the next slide.
So there are two elements to your pension. There's the employer's contribution, which is what the employer pays on your behalf. Now, this is a fixed percentage of your pensionable pay. And then we've got the employee's contribution, which is the bit that you pay yourself into your pension. And this is determined by how much you earn in any year. I've included a table which shows the actual pensionable pay and the contribution rates which would apply depending on what you earn. For example, if your earnings were 50,000, if you go to line 5 on the table, you can see that you would fall into 47,846 to 70,000. Therefore, you will pay pension at 12.5%. So annualisation isn't new. It came into effect from the 1st of April 2008 for officer members. These will be Employees within a GP practice, there might be salaried positions at a CCG and a trust. It was then further introduced from April 2015 for general practitioners. And members of the 2015 pension scheme will set their tier rates depending on their actual annualised earnings, which could be different to their actual earnings. And we'll just talk about the different types of schemes. So GPs contributing to the 2015 scheme are the people who are subject to annualisation. GPs who are active members of the 1995-2008 scheme are not subject to annualisation. So you might ask yourself, which scheme am I a member of? So a GP who was born after August 1965 will automatically be a member of the 2015 scheme. So any registrars coming through now will automatically go into that scheme. Members born prior to August 1965 will transfer into the 2015 scheme on a gradual basis. So I've put a link to a table which shows at what point you will go into the 2015 scheme depending on your date of birth. So the employee contribution rate is very much determined by what pension scheme you're a member of, the mix and timing of your income within the year. So I've tried to lay out a few examples and scenarios to show you how the different schemes might affect the amount of pension that you actually pay. So the first example is a locum with no other earnings who was employed from the 1st of April to the 28th of February, and then from the 27th of March to the 31st of March, let's say pensionable income of 70,000. As we've mentioned earlier, the 1995-2008 scheme, annualisation doesn't apply, and it's based on actual earnings. So if we look at the 70,000 and compare that to the table on the previous slide, you would fall into 12.5%, which you would pay contributions for the year of 8,750. So looking at the 2015 scheme, the old rules, and these are the rules that were in play from the 1st of April 2015 to the 31st of March 2019. Now the rules stated that any breaks in service of less than 3 months, and you were in pensionable service at the first day and the last day of the year, that's the 1st of April and the 31st of March, you do not need to annualise your income, and therefore in the example you would pay pension at 12.5%. But if we move on and look at the new scheme, that for the new rules from the 1st of April 2019, any breaks in service, no matter how small, whether it be a day, will lead to annualisation. So if we look at an example, the same example, you've got income of 70,000 and say your pensionable service days were 339, and that was from the 1st of April to the 28th of February, so that would be 334 days, and the 27th of March to the 31st of March, which was 5 days, which totals 339. Now this assumes that you're working every day for simplicity. If you only work part weeks, you would need to add up the amount of days that you're actually working within each week, which could then affect your tier rate and bring you into a higher tier. So on this example, you would annualise the 339 days for 365, which then would take your total earnings to 75,369. which, if we compare it to the table on the previous slide, would put you into a higher tier of 13.5%, and you would pay employee contributions of 9,450, which is an increase of £700. If we then look at a scenario, a different scenario which would affect the 2015 scheme, as we've discussed earlier, the 95-2008 scheme is not subject to annualisation, so we'll move on to the 2015 scheme. So in this scenario, the break in service does exceed 3 months. Therefore, on the old rules up to 31st of March 2019, you would still need to annualise your income. And an example, so the non-pensionable service will be from the 1st of September to the 31st of December. Again, this is assuming that you're working every day. So the pensionable service will be 243 days, and you would annualise your income based on 365 days, which then takes you to 75,103, which again puts you in to 13.5% employee contributions of 6,750, which is an increase of £500 had you higher than had you been in the old scheme. And if we look at the rules from the 1st of April 2019, again, no break in service, any break in service is subject to annualisation, so the principle of the calculation is the same from the previous slide. You would annualise for 365 days, therefore pay pension at a higher tier rate of 13.5%, or higher if you work less days of the week. So if we were to look at somebody who's got a mix of income and not just locum, if they were a salaried GP from the 1st of April to the 31st of October, and then became a locum from the 10th of November to the 31st of March. Again, as discussed earlier, 1995-2008 scheme, no annualisation. But if we look at the 2015 scheme, the old rules, the rules in place are that any break in service between finishing one role and commencement of a new role, for example, finishing a salary GP role and commencement of a locum role, you would always annualise the income. So there was a break in service between the 1st of November to the 9th of November, therefore you would annualise the salary and locum income to 365 days. Again, under the new rules from the 1st of April 2019, any gaps in service are subject to annualisation, so you would apply the same calculation, being 365 days, which could affect your tier rate. A further example, which could potentially alter the 2015 rules, if we just move on and look at that. So, member of the 2015, so if you are a salaried GP from the 1st of April, say, to the 31st of October, just go back a slide, and then became a locum from the 1st of November for 2 days, and then you took a break and then recommenced your locum work from the 1st of December to the 31st of March. On the old rules prior to the 1st of April 2019, there was no break of service between finishing the salary GP role and commencement of the locum role. And also the break in service in the locum period was less than 3 months. Therefore, you do not need to annualise this income under the old rules. However, from the 1st of April 2019, any gap in service, you would annualise the income, therefore apply. You would calculate how many days as a locum you worked and apply that to 365 days. If we were to look at a registrar, a new registrar who finishes and then either becomes a freelance locum or they become a salaried GP partway through the year. Annualisation would always apply because the registrar period is a separate pension scheme. So unless you were there the full year, you would still apply annualisation, and that would be whether the old rules up to March 2019 and the new rules from the 1st of April 2019. So how does it affect people who are part-time? Well, salaried GPs who've got a contract that runs the full year, and they might have ad hoc locums, and regardless of whether they are full-time or part-time, won't be subject to annualisation. However, locums are affected by annualisation if they're not in a full year contract. And similarly, if you go on maternity leave, annualisation won't apply if you are in a contract for the full year. However, locums will be subject to annualisation. So how can we calculate our contribution rates? Well, obviously we are here to help with that. And my locum manager, there are forms available which will, if you calculate your tier rate, will work out the pension that's due on that automatically without you having to get your calculator out yourself. There is also, in order to work your actual contribution, annualised contribution rate, there's the NHS annualisation calculator. Now this was developed to help GPs, and if they put their GP work and their income, it will then calculate the correct contribution rate. Apparently though, with the rules in place from the 1st of April 2019, the calculators are not quite set up for that yet. So there is a link on the slide which will take you to that calculator. You do need to be careful at the end of the year, in March, that you make sure that you allocate the work that you've carried out in March to that particular year, despite the fact that it might have been paid after the year end, because that could affect your tier rate. So what if I think I've paid the wrong contribution rate? You can complete an annual certificate. For salaried GPs, you can complete type 2 certificates, which you detail all your income, and it will calculate what contribution rate you should have paid your pension on. Also, for freelance locums, the March GP Locum B form. You would need to liaise with PCSE via their portal. I've put a link to PCSE portal in order to correct any arrears or overpayments. Now this is likely to happen in quite a few, because it's difficult at the beginning of the year sometimes to actually know what your level of income is going to be. So there is likely to be some form of settling up at the end of the year. Just to touch on the changes, as Serena mentioned, in the employer rate from the 1st of April 2019. So the employer's contribution, so that's what they pay on your behalf, is to increase from 14.38 to 20.68. And as Serena mentioned, in 2019-20, the rate will be 14.38 and the Treasurer will pick up the difference. But from 2021, we're still waiting for guidance, but it's likely to be paid by the practice with funding to be agreed. Any questions?
Yeah, we have. Thanks for that, Suzanne. We do have quite a few questions that have come through. What I'll probably do is I'll go through, some questions were sent in beforehand, so I think I'll go through those before. And what I might do, because it might help explain it, it might help with your explanations if I put the tier rate up so that everyone can see kind of from their questions where they're going to fall. So one of the questions that was quite common that a lot of people asked was, is it better? Because obviously, if you look here, we're supposed to guess how much we're gonna earn in a year.
Yeah.
And with local work or with portfolio work, or if you're a salaried GP and you're locum on top, often you can do a rough ballpark, but there are times where you're a lot busier and you're being offered a lot more sessions, or you might want to plan for a big expense or something, so you might work a bit more. I know a lot of locums, some of them that have signed on today, that are planning, for example, to take maternity leave, so they're ramping up their number of sessions because then they're not going to be working for a while. So one of the key questions that came in was, should you just, when you're invoicing, just invoice at the rate that you're currently set at, and then at the end of the year, the end of the financial year, kind of calculate your sessions retrospectively, and then if you've underpaid, just send that extra payment to PCSE? Or is it better to overpay, so just set at the highest rate you think you're going to fall under, and then try and claim a rebate?
I probably would suggest, it might be easier to actually set a tier rate that you roughly think is going to be your income for that year, and then make a payment at the end of the year, rather than set all your tier at a very high rate. But because if you've got a rough idea of where your income is going to fall,
I think it makes sense to try and be as accurate as you can with setting your tier rate. So try to estimate what your income is going to be for the full year. I mean, you may amend that as you go through the year, but the important thing with pension contributions is you only get tax relief on the contributions when they're actually paid. So if you pay too little pension during the year, then you potentially have a higher tax bill. If you pay too much pension in the year, then your tax bill will reduce, but the following year you may find that it swings the other way and you end up paying too much tax. So I think the message is to try and be as accurate as you can with estimating your income and using the proper tier rate during the year.
I think it also depends on the individual's attitude to risk, and if they want no shocks later, to actually go to the highest tier rate to cut the risk of having an unknown liability later. But that's down to the individual GP to decide.
So on my Locum Manager, so I use that obviously for, not only have I set it up, but I use it for my portfolio work and my locum work, but I can track my sessions and I can track what my income is. So it gives me a good guesstimate of what I should be paying into my pension. It's just a question of, for those people whose income might be quite variable, obviously, paying a larger chunk and then trying to claim it back, it's not the quickest mechanism to get that money back when you've overpaid. So I think people naturally want to be a bit cautious at overpaying, so they don't have to go through the whole wait and the application process of trying to get that money back. But I guess there are lots of ways of making sure that that you can roughly, calculate or predict your tier, and then if you fall under or over, then obviously you can try and rectify it later. But okay, thank you for that.
Yeah, I think you're right, though, Serena. It can take some time these days to get your money back from PCSE.
Yeah. Okay, so cracking on with these questions. God, everyone types of phone. I'm going to try and find the first one. So Shabazz, hi Shabazz, is asking, as a locum GP who's a sole trader, he's been out of the pension scheme. If he wants to go back in, can I pay towards the pension at the end of the financial year? And if so, how?
Rather than you mean if they're locuming throughout the year and he's wanting to settle up at the end of the year?
Yeah.
Well, they do have with if you're a locum, you do have this 10-week window though, don't you? Where you have to, well, in theory, you have to pay the pension over within that 10 weeks, relating to you. So you could be. I would suggest paying your pension as you go along.
Yeah, so once you've passed the 10-week window, you lose the opportunity to pension that income.
Yeah.
You might be, it might be more difficult for you to pension that income.
Yeah, because you'd be out of the 10-week window. So yeah. Okay, and then I'm just trying to find okay, Shabazz is also asking, what's the advantage or disadvantage of paying the higher pension contribution?
Well, obviously you would only pay pension contribution on your actual calculated earnings, and obviously there will be a settling up, so you wouldn't pay any higher rate than your actual calculated.
Do you mean? I wonder if does that mean what's the advantage?
Rate
14.5, say.
Yeah, or say for example, you usually fall under the tier 3, so you're normally earning up to 26,000, and in the old scheme you'd be pensioning at 7.1%, but when you calculate it, maybe you fall under the 12.5%. Are there any advantages or disadvantages of having to pay that extra bit now?
No, I mean you don't get. Obviously, the pension that you ultimately get will be based on your earnings, but you don't get any benefit from having to pay at a higher contribution rate than the lower contribution rate. It effectively just costs you more for your pension.
Yeah, so it doesn't mean that you're paying more into your pension, and it doesn't mean you're getting a bigger tax relief. It just means you're paying. You're just paying more money. It's more expensive for you, essentially.
You will get more tax relief because you've paid more pension,
yeah.
But it still costs you more effectively, and the effect on your pension is not. The only reason you get more in pension is because you've earned more rather than what you've actually paid. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay, so Rosalind's asking, what's the definition of a gap in service? A weekend, a day off? You're not allowed a day off, Rosalind, if you're a GP. Come on.
I think under the new rules from April 19, 1st of April, I think there is still some sort of a grey area as to what they define as being, if are you working on a weekend. But I think that's more when you're actually in service at the beginning, in April, whether it's the 1st of April falls on a weekend, whether that's classed as pensionable service. There is some guidance that suggests that if a surgery is open 7 days a week, therefore a weekend is classed as pensionable service, or if it's open 5 days, then it's not.
So I discussed this same question with the NHS kind of business services authority or pensions, and I think the guidance on their website is that if you take a day off, any day off, weekend or otherwise, then you are subject to annualisation.
You are as a locum, yeah.
As a locum you are, yeah.
As a salaried GP, if you only work 2 days a week, you've got a contract. You've got a contract with them, but you only work 2 days a week. You don't annualise the income. Whereas as a locum, if you only do 2 days a week, then yes, you would. So
that brings me on to my next question. What if you're a part-time salaried GP who's also doing a bit of locum work on the side?
That's, I think, because they're in a contract for the whole year, whether they be full-time or part-time, if they're doing just ad hoc locum work, then they wouldn't be subject to annualisation.
Okay.
It's when there's gaps in service.
Oh, I see. So that might be a good way of trying to.
There might be sort of additional sessions, but no, they wouldn't be annualised.
And Asin's asking, essentially annualisation is making us pay more into our pension for the same end result at the end. Is that a subtle way of increased taxation?
Yeah. Correct. Yeah, that's right, Serena.
Okay, next question. D. Hi D. D is a portfolio GP and pays pension for non-GP work. I pay pension for the non-GP work in my GP role. I work through a limited company, so I've not paid into the NHS pension for over a year. Does this affect me adversely? Would it be worth looking into a private pension if I'm unable to pay into the NHS pension scheme? So I think that's slightly a different question. We have done previously a webinar on, limited company and private pension and leaving the NHS pension scheme and options. I don't know if that really fits in with annualisation, so I might send you a link for our previous webinar on that, and you can take a look at that for more information. Okay, Stephanie's asking quite an important question. Are you subject to annualisation if you take on a regular locum contract, say you're locuming for a year or so within a practice?
I think that would depend whether it's a salaried contract.
Yeah, I think.
Is there an employment contract?
What if it was just you're locuming there for, you're there locum for a year, essentially doing regular?
I would suspect you will be subject to annualisation, but I will just double check that.
Okay.
Because I will get back on that one and answer that.
Yeah. Okay. Next one. So Mahmood, hi Mahmood. Mahmood works as a locum GP 2 days a week and then does out of hours ad hoc, and so isn't sure whether they need to annualise their locum work.
Yes, they would do. Yes.
And then Sandy is not having any luck getting in touch with PTSD. Yeah, I think that's a national problem, really. Excuse me.
Have they gone via the portal? Every PCSE, everything is dealt with these days by the portal. So any queries, anything is dealt with that way, and they are supposed to respond and give you a case number. So
Joanne is asking, if you work 2 days a week as a locum, are you expected to pay pension as if you're working 5 days a week?
Yeah.
Yes.
You are working. Yes. If you're working 2 days a week, you're expected to pension based on a tier rate of it as if you were working 365 days. Yes.
Yeah, and that Sandy is asking the same question actually, that she only works 4 sessions a week and then sometimes has a 2-week gap, etc. So, and saying, what should I do? So essentially you'd have to guess, roughly estimate your income.
Yeah, and then work out how many sort of days you think you're working in the year, and so if you can roughly say, well, I'm going to be doing 4 days a week and then you would apply the annualisation calculator for 365 days.
Okay, yeah. And you can also, if you're unsure and you don't want to, because obviously the calculator you'll apply kind of toward the end of the year, Suzanne, is that right?
Yeah.
So essentially what you could do is, if you're using something like My Locum Manager, it will track how much you earn every month, and you can average that out and then do your pension forms, and then at the end of the year try and reset the balance and pay any money you owe extra, as opposed to trying to guess that every month. So that might be a good way of missing that.
It probably makes sense to set one, tier rate for that year, and then, like you say, try as reasonably accurately as you can to estimate your income and try and get the rate as near as possible, and so that mitigates any kind of large settling up at the end of the year.
Yeah, okay. And there's lots of questions about, well, what does that mean? Should we leave the pension scheme or look at a private scheme? And we will be doing another webinar on this with BHP. So just follow up. We usually post them on our Facebook page, or if you're on our mailing list, you'll get a link, and our users, My Locum Manager users, get a link first. So they sign up first, and whatever's left, then we publicise it out. But we will be doing a separate one on that, because obviously that's a whole topic in itself. So watch this space and we'll bring you something to address that question as well. Kritika saying, it sounds like you can't take any holiday time as a locum GP. Well, you can, but you're going to pay for it, essentially, I think.
You've summed it up.
Yeah. And then Sean saying, okay, again, this question probably affects quite a lot of the people that have tuned in today. She's a salaried GP for a day a week, and then does extended hours and has the salaried contract is for the entire year, but the rest of the time she locums. Does she have to annualize this income? So it's not a really traditional salaried GP post that she's doing.
So she's got a salaried GP contract for 1 day a week.
Yeah, but it's part of a non-clinical quality improvement work. And then she does extended hours and locum work on top.
I suppose it's still a contract though, isn't it?
Yeah, and if it's for the full year, yeah, she wouldn't have to annualise the locum work.
I don't think so. No, because it is still a contract.
Yeah. Okay. So that's something we'll check, and we'll post. We'll send an email out after once we've clarified that. Natasha's asking, hi Natasha, would tax relief still be given if the pension contribution was paid the following year via the Type 2 pension form?
Yes, it would.
You get the tax relief, but you get it the following year rather than the year that it related to.
Yeah, and I think the tricky thing for people who are maybe taking maternity leave out, or maybe they've got more expenditure that particular year, it means you're not going to see that extra money until the next financial year. So that can be a bit tricky.
To what cut off,
Oh, okay. Shabs is asking an interesting question. Would they be subject to annualisation? So if they're locuming and then they start a salaried contract mid-financial year and carry on doing some locum sessions.
So just say that again, sorry. They're a salaried.
So the question is, would I be subject to annualisation if I started a salaried contract mid-financial year and did a few locum sessions?
It depends. If, as we said in the slides, under the certainly from April 19, yes, you would annualise. Yeah, you'd annualise that income. Prior to April 19, if you went from a salaried GP role to a locum role straight away, and there was less than 3 months service in your locum period, then you wouldn't. But under the new rules, any break in service, or if you're going, yes, you would. If you're not, and if your locum is not every day. So, yeah.
Okay, great. And, oh God, lots of other questions coming through. Sorry, there's quite a few questions I'm just trying to pick out. Okay, so hi Hala is asking, if someone earns, say, £81,600 a year pre-tax, how much will they pay for their pension at the highest rate?
At the highest rate? You mean what rate would they, or?
I think they mean what rate would they pay at?
They would pay, on 81,000, they pay at 13.5%.
Okay. Chan is asking, as accountants, are you able to liaise directly with PCSE on the behalf of the locums you represent regarding pensions?
Unfortunately.
With authority?
Yes, with authority, yeah.
So we need the client's authority and a letter signed for the accountants to be able to speak to them direct.
We can deal with people's pensions with their authority, yes, and we can advise with PCSE. But they are very everything is done via the portal. You have to raise your queries via the portal, but obviously we can we can advise on any queries you might have with PCSE.
Okay, Sapna, hi Sapna. So she's asking, she works as a portfolio GP 1 day a week in a cash clinic. What's a cash clinic? What's a cash clinic, Sapna? Please clarify. Is it a clinic locally and we just get loads of cash? What is it? So she's saying she works as a portfolio GP 1 day a week in some kind of clinic, which sounds like it's full of cash. And then some weeks I want to work there. And then some weeks she works a different number of locum sessions. How do I work out my pension needed to pay? So Sapna, go on to My Locum Manager, put your sessions on there, and it will work it all out for you. And you will have all this free time because it will do everything. So I would suggest you go and do that. It will honestly make your life so much easier. I'm going to put a link for you in the chat box. So it should have come up for you there. Just click on it, sign up for the trial, and it will do all of that for you. So Olium, I hope I've pronounced that right. Hi Olium, is asking to double check. Everyone has this question on their lips at the moment. If you're a part-time salaried GP and you're locuming for the rest of the time, you do not need to annualise your pension. Is that right, guys?
If you're in a contract for the year, regardless, and you do ad hoc locum work, yeah, your rate will be what your rate is for your salary GP position and whatever locums you're doing. Yes.
So what does it mean when people say you've got to add then annualise, or annualise then add?
Well, it would mean add your different forms of income. So in their case, they've got a salaried GP position, which they'll get X income, and they'll have locum fees at a certain amount, and the total of those two together will, whatever the total is, you would then marry it to whatever contribution rate you needed to pay for that year. So you had 50,000 as a salaried GP, 30,000 in locum fees, that's 80,000. If you look at the table, you would pay pension on 13.5%.
Okay. And Kerem's asking the same. Oh, sorry. Go on, Suzanne. Sorry to
interrupt. No.
Kerem's asking, probably, following on from that question, that if your daily income varies, how would you calculate your annualized salary if your wage changes depending on where you work? And Kerem, there's a tier rate, and you can see it's a range of income that you'd be getting. You don't have to do it kind of daily, day to day, or week to week. It's an average over the year.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
Okay, so everyone's happy about the fact if you're doing a bit of salaried work and locum on top, you're not affected. So Joanne Jones, hi Joanne, is asking, the amount we pay on the locum B form is a massive underestimation of what we need to pay at the end of the year because of annualisation if working 2 days a week. No, it should be. It should be.
It's more than like the less that you work, the more the annualisation.
Yeah.
So if you're only doing 2 days, obviously there's a bigger annualisation, and yes, it is a lot different to what your actual earnings are. But although it's set in a tier rate, a higher tier rate, you're only paying pension on your earnings, but just at a higher rate. But yes, that is correct. Unfortunately.
So, is it Chiba is just making me laugh? Pensions, can't live with them, can't live without them. Disgust. That's okay. So Asim's asking, I guess this is just what you're saying, Suzanne. If as a locum GP you take more days off, does it increase the pensionable pay and therefore the tier? So you're punished for working less or taking breaks?
Yeah.
Yes. That's the story. Okay, Sinead. Hi, Sinead. Sinead is starting as a salary GP in September and plans to locum for a month in August and also do ad hoc work around salaried work. We've already covered this, so yes, no, you won't be subject to annualisation, but
you will in that case. You will in that case because she wasn't not in a contract the full year. So if she was
Oh, I
starting
see.
in
That's interesting.
September, that's not a full year. So it's part way through the year. So she would be subject to annualisation.
Oh, okay. So if they're in a contract from, is it the 1st of April?
First
Then?
of April, yes. If they're in a contract for the full, what they call the pension year, which is between the 1st of April and 31st of March, then that's a full year. But because she's starting as a salaried GP part way through the year, then yes, she would be subject.
Because she's locuming in August for a month, and then she locums 7 days a week for the entire month of August.
So she's not. So she's got a mix. If she was working as if she was working as a locum totally every day, and then went to be a salaried GP from the following day, so she finished at the 31st of August and started as salaried GP at the 1st of September, then she wouldn't annualise, but she's not going to be locuming every day, so there will be an element of annualisation.
Okay, and just to clarify, Sapna has clarified that for those of you Googling cash clinic for locums, it's not where you go to get loads of cash, it's a family planning clinic. So thank you for clarifying that. Everyone's like, where do I sign up? You can't sign up, it's a family planning clinic. Okay, so just last few questions now. We've got loads, and what we'll do is I'm going to put the last slide up where you can contact us for more questions. Colin, are you there today?
Yes, Serena.
Colin's a massive Love Island fan, so we've got to clock off at 9.
All right, good luck.
I'm only joking, Colin. So, anyway, so Anish is asking, I started my first salaried GP. I've got an image of Colin watching Love Island now. Right, Anish is you can paint that later, Colin. So Anish started their first salary job post in October 2018. Before this was a registrar. I do not locum. Should I be annualised, or should my pension tier rate be based on the income from October to March 31st? That's a good question.
No, they will be annualised because they only started that post from the October, and the registrar period is classed as a different scheme, so they would be subject to annualisation, yes.
And Prash is asking, what about maternity leave as a salaried GP? So
if you're in contract for the full year, then no, you're not subject to annualisation, no.
Okay. Niru is asking, what is the Type 2 form?
The Type 2 form is a form that relates to salaried GPs, and I think that locums can fill this in as well. It's a summary of all their income for that. They should do one every year. Every salaried GP should fill out a Type 2 pension certificate each year, and it includes all their income for that year, whether it be salaried GP and if they've done any out of hours work or locum work for other practices, then you would factor that in and it would calculate your tier rate, and then it will highlight any under or over payments.
And there is a deadline.
And there is a deadline of the 31st of February.
28th of February.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, 28th of February, yes.
That's following the pension year.
And this should be, and this is quite important that this is done for salaried GPs, because they don't get their employment records updated by NHS pensions unless they actually fill these forms in correctly. So they are important.
Okay, Joe. So Niraj, I'll start with Niraj's question first. So she's she's saying if you're an ST3, so GP training until September, and then you start a salaried contract the day after CCT with ad hoc locums on top, would you be subject to annualisation?
Yeah, you would, yes.
You would, yeah. So that means that you'll just have to calculate over the year and then pay the additional tier rates for that year. And Joe's asking, if you work as a salaried GP and change practices finishing on a Friday, then join a new practice on Monday but do ad hoc locums, do you have to annualise, as there are a couple of days break between jobs if you count the weekend?
Ooh.
You're testing us here.
Yeah. Grey area, I would suggest again. It's
We'll probably have to check the guidance for that, I think.
yeah.
If there is any guidance, that is.
Yeah. Last couple of questions then. A Pritika is asking, if annualisation is unacceptably high for a portfolio GP doing a few locum sessions, can they opt to leave the pension scheme rather than pay?
They don't have to pension that income from the locum work.
It's not mandatory to be in the pension scheme. Or do you mean just that piece of that piece of income?
Yeah, I think she meant just for that piece of income.
Yeah, so technically, if you're in the pension scheme, you should be pensioning all your income. But of course, there's the 10-week window for pensioning as well. And if you miss that 10-week window, then you do lose the right to pension it.
Yeah, and Pritika's put then I would return the employer contribution. So yeah, if you initially claim it.
And that would be expected, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, a little bit about out of hours. So Joanne does 2 to 3 sessions a month out of hours that she doesn't pay pension on, and presumes this will affect things as well.
Is there a reason why she doesn't pay pension?
I don't know.
It could be an unemploying authority out of hours provider.
Yeah, some don't. Yeah.
Private out of hours, wouldn't it?
So
Yeah.
that pension.
Because normally out of hours are either done on solo forms, and they usually would receive the amount less the pension contribution.
It depends on the provider.
And, it does depend on the provider. Yeah.
Okay. And last question from Lewis, and I'm just going to put up the question slide. So if we finish training in August and stay away from work until the 1st of April next year, do we need to annualise anything?
If we finish in
August and they don't work until the start of the next financial year?
yes, they will be. Yes, they will be subject. What were they doing? Do we know?
Well, it says stay away from work, so I assume they're not working.
Any work, if it's not under the new rules, if it's not a full year, so if they're doing just a little bit and then just don't work for, that income in that year will be annualised.
Okay, so just a quick thing about the calculation. So we'll put the link up for, Matt, could you do that for the NHS BSA?
Yeah, it's on there.
Oh, it's on there. Okay, the link's on there, so you go through to the calculator. But if you're doing locum work or salaried and you're doing ad hoc locum work, you may find something like My Locum Manager really helpful to help you track what you're working and what you think your pensionable tier rate's going to be. Yeah, and that's just a bit about, so for BHP clients as well, they get an additional discount off My Locum Manager, so just quote that discount code at the bottom there, BHP Locum, to find out more. You will get an email after the webinar, probably, I think, in the next couple of days, and we'll try and add the useful links that we mentioned so that you've got everything to hand, and then this copy of this webinar will be on our YouTube page for a short while, so you can always kind of tune in and watch that as well. And if you've got any other questions, like I honestly work a lot with BHP and with Colin and Jenny, and I'd honestly say that as a locum GP, like the advice that they give, we do a lot of workshops with them as well. It really is second to none, and they really look at the whole picture, like whether you're going to be buying a house in the next year, whether, what your long-term plan is and things like that. And they're really approachable. So do contact them if you've also got any additional questions as well. As it's time for Colin to tune into Love Island, we're going to say goodbye now.
I was just going to remind you, Serena, you've now missed 5.5 minutes.
I don't know what you're talking about, Colin. I'm not. But thank you everyone for joining us. If you've got any ideas or any particular webinars you'd want us to cover, just email us on info@mylocummanager.com. If you have any particular areas and things and questions, accountancy related, you can contact BHP. If you've got questions about locum work and stuff, you can contact me. And we hope that was really useful, and we look forward to seeing you at the next one. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.